Ricky was a clever fox. He was known throughout the forest for his sharp mind and quick thinking. He lived in a big green forest, filled with tall trees, vibrant flowers, and a variety of animals. Ricky loved to explore every nook and cranny of his home. He was very good at solving problems, whether it was finding the best path through the dense underbrush or figuring out how to get the juiciest berries from the highest branches. Ricky always had a solution. Sometimes he boasted about how smart he was. He would gather the other animals and tell them stories of his cleverness, making sure everyone knew just how intelligent he was. One sunny day, Ricky was exploring a new part of the forest. The sun was shining brightly, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. He was humming a happy tune, his tail swishing back and forth as he walked. Ricky felt a sense of excitement as he ventured into the unknown. He was feeling very confident. With each step, he reminded himself of all the times he had outsmarted others and solved difficult problems. After all, he was Ricky the clever fox. He knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would be able to handle them with ease. As Ricky continued his journey, he came across a wide river. The water was flowing swiftly, and there was no bridge in sight. Ricky paused for a moment, thinking about how he could cross it. He decided to build a raft. He gathered some sturdy branches and vines, using his sharp teeth to cut and tie them together. It took some time, but eventually, he had a raft that looked strong enough to carry him across the river. With a determined look on his face, Ricky pushed the raft into the water and began to paddle. The current was strong, but Ricky used all his strength to keep the raft moving forward. After a few minutes of hard work, he reached the other side of the river. Ricky felt a surge of pride as he stepped onto the shore. He had done it. The new part of the forest was even more beautiful than he had imagined. There were plants and animals he had never seen before, and Ricky couldn't wait to explore every inch of it. As he wandered through the forest, he met new animal friends. They were curious about the clever fox who had crossed the river, and Ricky was happy to share his story with them. Ricky even took the time to teach some of the animals how to solve problems. He showed them how to build rafts, find the best paths, and gather food efficiently. By the end of the day, Ricky felt happy and fulfilled. He had not only explored a new part of the forest, but also made new friends and shared his knowledge with others. As the sun began to set, Ricky found a comfortable spot to rest. He looked out at the beautiful forest, feeling grateful for the day's adventures. With a contented sigh, Ricky closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the many adventures that awaited him in the days to come. Ricky, the clever fox, had once again proven that with a sharp mind and a brave heart, anything was possible. Suddenly, Ricky stopped. He gasped. Right in front of him was a sight that made his mouth water. A grapevine, heavy with the juiciest, plumpest grapes he had ever seen. The grapes were a deep, rich purple. They looked so delicious. Ricky imagined their sweet, juicy taste. He had to have them. Ricky jumped and jumped. He stretched his paws as high as he could, but the grapes were too high. He tried climbing the grapevine, but it was too slippery. Ricky tried again and again. He even tried hitting the vine with a stick, but the grapes remained just out of reach. He felt frustrated. He was used to succeeding. Just then, some rabbits hopped by. They were a lively bunch, their little feet barely making a sound on the forest floor. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting playful shadows as they moved. The rabbits seemed to be in high spirits, their ears twitching with curiosity and excitement. They saw Ricky and giggled. Their laughter was infectious, a light-hearted melody that echoed through the woodland. It was as if they had stumbled upon a secret joke, one that only they understood. The sight of Ricky, standing there with a puzzled expression, seemed to amuse them to no end. "What are you doing, Ricky?" they asked. Their voices were soft and inquisitive, filled with genuine curiosity. The rabbits had always been friendly creatures, always eager to know what was happening around them. They gathered around Ricky, their eyes wide with interest, waiting for his response. Ricky felt his face turn red. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not in such an unexpected way. The warmth of embarrassment spread across his cheeks, making him feel even more self-conscious. He could feel the eyes of the rabbits on him, their gazes gentle but probing. He didn't want to admit defeat, especially not in front of the rabbits. Ricky had always prided himself on being clever and resourceful. Admitting that he couldn't reach the grapes would be like admitting a personal failure. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves and muster up some confidence. "So," Ricky said, "oh, those grapes. They're probably sour anyway." He tried to sound nonchalant, as if the grapes were of no consequence to him. It was a classic case of sour grapes, a way to save face in front of the curious rabbits. Ricky hoped his casual tone would convince them. "I don't even want them," he added, waving a paw dismissively. Ricky's heart was still pounding, but he managed to keep his voice steady. He wanted to appear indifferent, as if the grapes were the last thing on his mind. It was a small act of pretense, a way to protect his pride. The rabbits looked surprised, but they hopped away. They exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of confusion and amusement. It was clear they didn't entirely believe Ricky's words, but they decided not to press the matter. With a final giggle, they bounded off into the forest, leaving Ricky alone with his thoughts. Ricky watched them go, feeling a mix of relief and regret. He was glad the moment of scrutiny was over, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed an opportunity. Maybe the grapes weren't sour after all. Maybe, if he had tried a little harder, he could have reached them. But now, he would never know. He glanced back at the grapes, still hanging tantalizingly out of reach. They seemed to mock him, a reminder of his moment of pretense. Ricky sighed, realizing that sometimes it's easier to pretend something doesn't matter than to face the possibility of failure. But deep down, he knew the truth. The grapes were still there, and so was the challenge. With a final look at the grapes, Ricky turned and walked away. The forest was quiet again, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. As he made his way through the trees, Ricky couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Maybe one day, he would find the courage to try again. But for now, he was content to let the grapes be, a silent testament to a moment of pretense. Ricky was alone again. The forest around him was quiet, the only sound being the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. He had wandered these woods many times, always in search of something more, something that would make him feel complete. But today, he felt a different kind of solitude, one that was more reflective and introspective. He looked at the grapes one last time. They hung tantalizingly high above him, their plump, juicy forms glistening in the dappled sunlight. Ricky had tried many times to reach them, jumping and stretching with all his might, but they always remained just out of his grasp. The grapes seemed to mock him, a constant reminder of his limitations. He knew he couldn't fool himself. Deep down, he had always known that those grapes were beyond his reach. He had told himself many stories to ease the sting of failure, convincing himself that the grapes were probably sour anyway, or that he didn't really want them. But today, standing alone in the quiet forest, he couldn't escape the truth. He admitted, "Those grapes are too high for me. It's okay." The words felt strange, yet liberating as they left his mouth. For the first time, he was honest with himself about his limitations. It wasn't a sign of weakness, but rather a moment of clarity and acceptance. Ricky realized that acknowledging his boundaries didn't make him any less of a fox. It made him more self-aware. "I can't always get what I want," he thought. And that was okay. Life was full of challenges and obstacles, and not every goal was meant to be achieved. Ricky understood that it was important to strive for his dreams, but it was equally important to recognize when to let go. This realization didn't diminish his determination. It refined it, giving him a clearer sense of purpose. Saying the truth out loud made him feel better. It was as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He no longer felt the need to prove himself to anyone, not even to himself. Ricky felt a sense of peace and contentment that he hadn't experienced in a long time. He smiled, feeling lighter and more at ease with his place in the world. He realized that it was braver to admit when something was out of reach than to pretend he didn't want it in the first place. This newfound courage gave him a sense of confidence and self-assurance. Ricky knew that there would be other opportunities, other grapes that he could reach. And when the time came, he would be ready. Not because he had to prove anything, but because he had learned to accept the truth and move forward with grace and dignity. Ricky continued his walk. He soon found a patch of delicious berries growing close to the ground. They were his favorite kind. He happily ate his fill. He even saved some to share with the rabbits. He knew they would love them. Ricky learned a valuable lesson that day. It was better to be honest with himself than to pretend to not want something just because he couldn't have it. He realized that everyone has limits, and that's okay. There's no shame in admitting when something is too difficult. From that day on, Ricky tried to be more accepting of his limitations. He learned to appreciate the things he had, instead of always longing for what he couldn't reach. And you know what? He found that being content and honest made him a much happier fox, and a much better friend too.